You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Oh, another dull news week with nothing really happening much. In fact, the Surrealism Corner and Inside the Headlines are two segments that are beginning to overlap and blur so much. I try to keep them separate, and I'll keep trying for a little longer, but I cannot guarantee it. Nonetheless, we have both today, and all I can say is you better seek protection from massive attack, because the pop, diva, punk, disco queen, Brit, singer-songwriter, everything but the girl who is a feminist, is my special guest, Tracey Thorn. But first, we're going to go inside those headlines. Things are really heating up and moving fast. And by the time you hear this, even 10 seconds from now, we could be in 1, a constitutional crisis, 2, World War III with Syria, Russia, North Korea, Iran, or the whole quartet, or 3, all of the above. Then again, we've been simmering for so long that it's almost a relief to approach a rolling boil, at least about the constitutional crisis part. Look at it this way. Superman's not the only one with nerves of steel. Every American has now developed them. Michael Cohen, Trump's personal fixer pseudo-lawyer, he who knoweth all Trump's secrets, is under investigation in Manhattan for bank fraud, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and campaign finance violations, with all his papers seized, and none of this is about Russia. It's simply to facilitate law enforcement's, quote, looking into a broader pattern or strategy to ensure the silence of women. Close quote. Remember that last phrase. Meanwhile, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, faces scrutiny by prosecutors in Brooklyn, and don't forget that convictions from state prosecutions are not pardonable by a president. Trump's former campaign chairman is under indictment, his former national security advisor has pled guilty to lying, and several former campaign aides are cooperating with special counsel Mueller, who wants to interview Trump about possible obstruction of justice. Meanwhile, back at the Senate, North Carolina Republican Tom Tillis, South Carolina Republican Lindsey Graham, Delaware Democrat Chris Coons, and New Jersey Democrat Cory Booker introduced brand new bipartisan legislation protecting Mueller to the Senate Judiciary Committee on Wednesday, and although Iowa Republican Senator Chuck Grassley, Judiciary Committee chair, has not yet lent the bill his support, he has requested consent to add the bill to the committee's agenda, which would likely place the legislation on track for committee markup next week. All of which indicates how seriously some Republicans, at least in the Senate, are now taking the situation. No wonder Trump's body language during his meeting with his so-called War Council, supposedly to discuss Syria, was a posture of self-hugging, slightly rocking back and forth terror. One sad thing in all this is how many details get washed away in the rapid current of misdeeds flowing continuously from Trump. One was the death of Trump Tower tenant Todd Brasner, who lived in apartment 50C in Trump Tower in New York. He perished horribly from burns and smoke inhalation because although Trump Tower has a system of smoke sensors, it lacks sprinklers. It was built in the 1980s before sprinklers were required in new residential towers. Then, in 1999, after a pair of fatal apartment tower fires, New York City passed a law requiring new apartment buildings to install sprinkler systems. Donald Trump led a group of developers who resisted requiring older buildings to be retrofitted with sprinklers, arguing it would have been too costly. Now the city council intends to revisit the issue, but that won't help Mr. Brasner, who'd been trying to sell his apartment from the moment Trump was elected but couldn't find a buyer. A small act of murder that falls by the wayside, but not so small, to Todd Brasner, 67 years old, who collected art and vintage electric guitars. Another tragic detail was lost in the avalanche of news over Mark Zuckerberg finally being forced to testify before the Senate and the House, while everyone justifiably wrings their hands over loss of privacy. That detail? Well, last week human rights activists in Myanmar finally received a reply from Zuckerberg after months of his ignoring their frantic appeals. The activists had been begging Facebook, which is a dominant source of information in Myanmar, to enforce its hate speech rules. Facebook had even been accused by United Nations investigators of facilitating attempted genocide against the Rohingya Muslim minority in allowing hate speech and false news to spread on its platform. How death always changes the scale of measurement. As for those Facebook devotees who, no matter what, still consider him just a kid, my favorite comment was made by Recode co-founder Kara Swisher when she said, quote, "Zuckerberg is one of the richest people on earth. He's an adult. He's 30-some years old. He founded this company, and he's the CEO. Journalists should stop being so extraordinarily shy about doing their job and should stop juvenilizing men here in Silicon Valley." Close quote. The dust is littered with Republicans who are biting it. Representative Blake Farenthold, who you remember had announced he wouldn't run for re-election, suddenly decided to resign from Congress immediately, after an ethics inquiry delved seriously into his sexual harassment of former staff members. I've lost count, but I think that's over 40 Republicans deserting the sinking ship. And of course, Mr. Charm himself, Speaker Paul Ryan, announced that he would not run for re-election. His motivation was that he needed to spend more time with his family. Now that is an innovative reason that we have never heard before. What makes these men think that their families want to spend more time with them? What makes these men think we will be impressed by their having decided after decades-long careers of seeing their families only during campaigns and for photo ops that they can suddenly adapt to parenting? And why couldn't they do both and? Senator Tammy Duckworth, Democrat of Illinois, gave birth to a daughter, Maylee Pearl, last Monday, making her the first U.S. senator to give birth while in office. Duckworth had also given birth to her first daughter, Abigail, while serving in Congress, and she was the first woman elected to Congress who'd been born in Thailand, as well as the first disabled woman to be elected to Congress, as well as the first female double amputee from the Iraq War, where she served as a U.S. Army helicopter pilot and suffered severe combat wounds. But Paul Ryan can't do a little parenting while serving in the House of Representatives? Gimme a break. And we'll round out with 3 short items. Michigan will stop providing free bottled water to the city of Flint. Governor Rick Snyder has announced that. Flint Mayor Karen Weaver was not informed of the decision until moments before it was made public, and she and city officials went up in arms. Snyder, you remember, was the guy who brought on the tragedy in Flint in the first place, the decision that poisoned hundreds and hundreds of children through lead in the water to save the state money. And now apparently he wants to do it all over again. But 2 flashes of good news from abroad. 5 unanimous votes in the Mexican Supreme Court were cast recognizing for the first time that the denial of a legal abortion after rape constitutes a violation of reproductive rights. Mexican feminists have been fighting this case since 2015. And in a nice end note, Qantas Airlines recently made history with an inaugural nonstop flight between Australia and Britain in less than 24 hours. Captain Lisa Norman commanded the flight, which was operated by 4 pilots taking turns, all of whom were under her command. They got a chance to rest. She didn't. And we'll revisit the phrase, looking into broader patterns or strategies to ensure the silence of women, later in the program, in Fighting Words. It's time for a break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will be back in just a moment with the Surrealism Corner. So get ready. Coming right up.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back, and come join me in the Surrealism Corner. Let's start with advice from other primates on how to deal with stress, which God knows is advice we need these days. A troop of Japanese rhesus macaque monkeys, or snow monkeys as they're called in Japan, live in the mountainous snowy area near Nagano, where the Winter Olympics were held. They became famous because they exhibit an adaptation in behavior that they alone among monkeys show. Their habitat is full of natural hot springs, where the temperature rises to well over 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, of course, uncomfortable for the monkeys. But in 1963, a young female macaque, of course it was a female, was observed bathing in a pool built by a hotel, where the water had been cooled to a temperature comfortable for humans. Well, at first a few macaques joining the humans was a tourist curiosity, but eventually it became a bit of a nuisance and even a health hazard. So a park was built with hot springs pools at 104 degrees Fahrenheit for monkeys only. It was assumed that the monkeys were trying to stay warm. Only recently have scientists investigated this behavior by measuring levels of stress hormones in the macaques, collecting and testing the monkeys' feces for levels of glucocorticoids which increase with stress. The cold is known to cause these hormone levels to rise. The scientists published their results in the journal Primate, and the results were that stress levels declined dramatically during the periods while the monkeys were bathing. Another indication of the value of this behavior was that the high-ranking females spent more time in the pool. I'm proud that there are leadership females, but I'm critical of their elitism. Dr. Raphael Takeshita and her colleagues at Kyoto University who did the testing also noticed that males are usually on the periphery of the troop and don't spend that much time bathing, either because they're not smart enough to care about their stress, or possibly they even enjoy it. But the females loll about, sometimes all day, just kicking back, relaxing, and having a high old macaque time in their custom temperature natural jacuzzi. While we're in Japan, we might take note that women seem to have unwittingly created quite a flapdoodle about being in the ring in sumo wrestling. Now, mind you, it's not that they want to get in there with those excessively plump, growly, G-string diaper-wearing guys and flop each other to the mat, thus violating another ancient all-male tradition. Personally, I'm grateful that's not the women's aim, since I confess that that kind of equal participation was not quite what I, for one, had in mind all these years as the feminist goal. For that matter, racing in the Indianapolis 500 isn't on my wish list either, but I do believe, I do believe, even if it's so not my thing, that women have a right to be wherever women want to be. The sumo ring, a straw circle known as a dohyo, was corrupted a few days ago by, gasp, the presence of women, including a nurse from the audience who rushed up to administer cardiopulmonary resuscitation to the mayor of Maizuru, who was giving a speech when he had a brain hemorrhage and collapsed. The nurse and 3 other women who had rushed to help were ordered off the stage by the referee, and the ensuing brouhaha, both in the audience and online, revolved around arguments as to whether, quote, crazy feminists will take advantage of this, close quote. Sumo ceremonies were performed in the imperial court as far back as the 8th century, and women back then were not admitted even as spectators, although there are apparently some historical references to female wrestlers and referees. But by 1990, anyway, the first female chief cabinet secretary to a prime minister was banned from presenting a trophy at a Tokyo tournament, and in 2000, the Sumo Association prohibited Fusaya Ota, the first female governor of Osaka, from awarding a trophy. Recently, the reputation of sumo wrestling has belly-flopped anyway due to a string of scandals involving assaults by senior champions on juniors. These guys need to find a jacuzzi of their own. Now here's a wonder. Researchers have made new discoveries about the in-between spaces in the human body, and some of them feel it's time to even rewrite anatomy books. Scientific Reports has published a study describing a fluid-filled 3D latticework of collagen and elastin connective tissue that can be found all over the body in or near our lungs, digestive tract, and arteries. It's like dark matter out there in the universe. It's difficult to describe, and the New York University School of Medicine called it alternately, quote, a series of spaces, a highway of moving fluids, and even an organ in its own right, close quote. This network is thought to possibly act as a shock absorber for other parts of the body, researchers say, or it could be a conduit for fluids to enter the lymphatic system, which means it could spread diseases or medications throughout the body. The paper referred to this, quote, widespread, macroscopic, fluid-filled space within and between tissues as the interstitium. Two endoscopic and gastroenterology experts, Petros Binis and David Carlock of Mount Sinai Beth Israel Hospital in Manhattan, used new probe-based technology in their study, revealing that the network was extensive and, quote, an entire system interfacing between the vascular system and the lymphatic, close quote. Will wonders never cease? You may have noticed that this past week we observed Equal Pay Day in the U.S., although many women get a little cranky about observing Equal Pay Day since we don't observe any equal pay. Here's a quick run through a few surreal statistics about what passes for our reality, helpfully provided by Jessica Bennett, who is slowly but surely brilliantly infiltrating the New York Times with some serious feminism as its so-called gender editor. She started by suggesting that women all show up to work 20% late, since 80 cents is the figure most cited as representing the amount that full-time, year-round employed women of all ethnicities make compared to men, according to 2016 census data. And how about this one? $10,086 is the amount on average that full-time employed women in the U.S. lose each year because of the gender pay gap. That gap is expected to close, given the current pace of change, in the year 2119. The most clear-cut and stunning figures come when you disaggregate by race as compared to white men. 54 cents is the amount Latina women make to the white male dollar. 57 cents is the amount Native women make to the white male dollar. 63 cents is the amount black women make to the white male dollar. 79 cents is what white women make compared to the white male dollar, and 89 cents is what Asian women, differentiated by region, make compared to the white male dollar. Then there's the damned if you do, damned if you don't statistic. A Census Bureau study found that women earn $12,600 less than men before children are born, and $25,100 less afterward. Finally, the perfect demonstration of why this is not just surreal but staggeringly stupid. The amount the global GDP would rise if we could reach gender parity is $12 trillion. It would be good for everybody. But that would be far too real. We have to take another brief pause. This is Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be back in just a moment with everything but the girl, except this time we've got the girl, and she's a feminist. My guest, Tracey Thorn.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. The defining British pop rebel, the former Marine Girl and Everything But the Girl singer and Massive Attack singer, Tracey Thorn, now 55, has finally released her third solo album after a long wait. Now, in that time, she has published 2 guest-edited BBC Radio 4's Today Show. She has written a New Statesman column and done even more. So she hasn't been lazy during that lapse. From her breakout success in Missing, through the classics Paris Match and Protection, on through the 80s, she continued to influence right up to today's White Stripes. She still does, and she mentors younger artists and particularly women. And this new album, long awaited, which is called Record, is a gem. It's a gem of musical artistry and of in-your-face feminism. Here is Tracey Thorn. Tracey, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you.
I'm going to leap in because we have limited time and there's so much I want to ask you. And let's start with the question that you must have been asked at least 473,000 times. Is it true, the apocryphal story about the Everything But the Girl name, the story that the record companies liked the music and liked the guys, they liked Everything But the Girl? Is that how it came to be?
No, that's an interesting version of it that I'm not sure I've heard before.
Really?
No.
Oh, tell me the other one.
So the name of the band we got originally from a furniture store in the town we were living in, and they had it as the slogan in their front window. And the idea, I think, was that, you know, you could buy everything to make your home complete except the girl. They could sell you everything else. So we thought that was kind of corny and hilarious, and we chose it as a name when we got together, really just to make what we thought was going to be one single, not realizing that we would end up having a lengthy career and having to explain this name.
You've never heard the explanation that I offered.
Never.
Isn't that interesting? Maybe it's a stateside mythography. So, okay, it's been, I think, something like 8 or 9 years since you've had a solo album, although you have hardly been lazy.
Well, you know, I had a long break from everything a few years ago. I went for, you know, when my kids were very small, I had a period of about 6 or 7 years when, you know, I retreated from the public eye. I stopped recording. I didn't do any creative work in that sense. And I think, you know, since I've come back, which was in about 2007, so about 10 years ago, I've just been in a sort of mood of saying yes to things. Mm-hmm. And trying not to get stuck in a repetitive cycle of necessarily always feeling I have to do the same thing. So, you know, I've made a couple of records. I've written a couple of books. When I got offered a column, I said, yes, okay, I'll try that. You know, what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work brilliantly, but let's try it. So, you know, I've just been embracing different opportunities, I think, and just trying to keep life interesting and varied.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and being a Renaissance woman. So let's talk about Record, which is the new album, aptly named. And it's wonderful. It is, you know, there was a time I remember, and you're old enough to remember, when if it was good, it couldn't be feminist. And if it was feminist, it couldn't be good. You remember that trap that women artists were told?
Yeah.
And some of us were trying to be both, and not commit suicide into the bargain, which always is the good thing to do if you want to be accepted. But you have managed both for a long time. And in this record, you've just absolutely triumphed. And the politics, it's everything from, everything feminist, from rage at the patriarchy to solidarity with other women to menopause and childbirth and raising kids. But it is also just superb musicianship. So congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, I have tried, I think, to be more direct on this record. Sometimes in the past I've written lyrics which seem to me to be quite clear in their point of view, but, have occasionally been misinterpreted or been too subtle. And, I've sometimes been described as, a very sort of typically confessional singer-songwriter, which is how women get described, I think. Men write songs or books or poetry or whatever, which is often interpreted as describing a universal experience, whereas women do the same. It's regarded as a sort of very unique and specific and confessional experience. I think, having endured that for a few years, I thought this time, okay, do you know what? I'm just going to write some songs that hopefully you can't really miss the point of.
Yeah.
And, it has proved to be the case. People have got them, and I think have appreciated that directness. And so I think, okay, hooray, it's worked. I've made my point, I think, quite clearly, without becoming, a bore about it, which, is always that thing that's hung over you. Don't go on about this. Don't become a bore.
That's
so
right.
You're trying always to be entertaining and, inclusive and artistic at the same time as being clear. So that was the aim this time around.
Well, and it is a tightrope to walk because you don't want to fall into, political rhetoric and jargon and all those words that end with ISM and TION. But you do want to get to the heart of the politics in a way that moves people, because that's the point of the art. So, but you have so pulled it off here. There is, listeners, if you haven't heard the record, there is every song is quite stunning, but there is an 8.5 minute little masterpiece on this called Sister. The audacity of an 8-minute song, 8.5 minutes. First of all, the feminism in the lyrics, and then the musicianship takes off at a certain point and is just, all you can do is sit there and stare into space and clutch your glass of wine and hang on. Brava.
Yeah, that came about in the studio, really. I'd written the song, obviously, and we recorded the bass and drums and guitar and everything quite live. So we had Stella and Jenny from the band Warpaint as the rhythm section. And they were playing, in the same room together. John O'Mar was on guitar, and we kind of played the song, which, the lyrics of the song only last for about 4 minutes. And when we got to the end of that section, I just signaled to them, to keep playing. Let's keep this groove going. We've got a really good groove going.
Yeah.
And it got so good that I think we ended up recording about 11.5 minutes. And I thought at that point, well, we'll have to edit this down somehow. Maybe we'll have this kind of extra long version that we can use as a bonus somewhere. But, the more we worked on it and the more we started putting the record together, and I began to realize how central that song was, I thought, well, this could be amazing. We could just have this really long version and it sits right in the middle of the record. And again, you can't miss the point then, can you? Here's this song. It's called Sister. The lyrics are really direct and it's 8 bloody minutes long. So you can't miss it,
Yeah, you can't miss it. But you don't want to miss it is the thing. The lyrics are very clear. You're quite right. I think like a girl. I fight like a girl. I am my mother. I am my sister. But it is never beat the tambourine. We now go to the barricades, comrades. It is never sort of, that tedious socialist realism art. It is just so moving. And on my third listen through, when the instrumental section just took off and soared, I just found myself sitting and laughing and crying at the same time.
Well, that's great. I think one of the other points of this record was I did want to make a very positive, sort of joyous record. I was feeling, oppressed and downhearted by political events in the world, which, I'm sure we share with a lot of people. and that inspired me to get working, but it also made me feel like, I don't want to add to the sum of human misery out there. I want to add to the sum of human spirit that makes you feel, there's solidarity. Other people are feeling this way. That's a very positive feeling. It's encouraging. It gives you heart. I wanted to make a record that had that kind of feeling.
Well, it is literally in the best sense of the word inspiring. I mean, helps you breathe, inspire. I mean, you suddenly feel that it's permissible to do all those things that you've been wanting to do if you haven't already done them, or if you have time to do them more and again. And the subject matter, when I was a young poet, and sort of steeped in the boys' techniques, the establishment male academic, techniques. I'd written my sonnets and my villanelles and and along comes the women's movement and the subject matter. Suddenly, Plath was among them, but not the only one. But suddenly, the words dish rag, or diaper could make their way in a poem. And men, of course, had been inserting their anatomy into poems with literal words and with euphemisms, my rod, my staff, for decades, and that was considered poetry. But but menopause would not have been a subject for art. And it's seamlessly in your work, and by now definitely in mine, all of this entire new vocabulary of the human experience, more than half humanity, gets into art, and it's better for art too, isn't it?
Well, I think so, absolutely. I think if the point of art is, to expand human awareness and empathy and, share in other people's experience, then obviously we want to hear from as many voices as possible. We want the richness of human experience to be reflected in the art that we experience. Otherwise, what's the point of it?
Yes.
It seems like we're cutting off our own, form of, enjoyment and appreciation of all art. I mean, I still think, in pop music, it is still a bit daring to talk about something like the menopause or, to talk about methods of contraception. So I still feel like I'm kind of dragging this language into a more sort of mainstream arena. And I'm happy to be doing so, really.
Yeah, well, you are. I mean, because I don't think these are, how do I put it, not your garden variety usual pop lyrics, or subject matter for usual pop lyrics. So you are definitely, breaking boundaries here. But have you gotten flack for that? Or, feminism is having its quote unquote moment. We're doing what we've always done and we will continue doing it. But thank God for the Me Too movement and for this worldwide surging, of women that ought to make it more, not only tolerable, but welcome to have such subject matter in pop lyrics.
Yeah. No, I've definitely felt that it's been greeted in a welcoming manner. And, I'm grateful for the fact that, we're in a moment again when these things are being talked about and there's interest in it. Because, I've lived through periods when that's been the case and then watched a backlash happen where everyone shuts up about it again. And, I've had periods in my writing career when I've felt, oh God, am I still banging on about this? It feels like everyone else is implying we've moved on from this, and so to feel it come around again, and here we go, here's another cycle. I think, part of me is frustrated. I think, why are we still having to have
That's right. Why do we have to again?
Yeah, I do think, although we get frustrated by those moments of backlash, I think, each time you slip back, you only slip back part of the way. Mm-hmm. So the progress that gets made each time, some of it stands and a generation grow up who've got used to living in slightly improved circumstances. Yes. And so I think that's good because then you think, well, they're not going to stand for losing these freedoms,
That's right.
You might try and have a backlash against them, but, once people, have grown up with certain rights and freedoms, it's hard to take them away. So, you slip back again. But then I think the next time you push forward, you get a little further forward each time. Well, that's me being optimistic.
No. Listen, if we weren't optimistic, we would slit our wrists over the nearest basin. I mean, way back in the 1970s, I would have called it at that point. Couple of quick questions. I just wanted to say that I really particularly was grateful for the New Statesman column that you wrote on intergenerational feminism and us older feminists sometimes doing a kind of, you don't know how good you had it. We had to walk 6 miles to school in bare feet. It's wonderful what the younger women are doing. And,
Yeah.
I don't even use the word second, third, or fourth wave anymore. I just go for permanent wave. I mean, it's,
That's a good, yeah.
just, tsunami. But also I wanted to ask a personal question. Is it true that I know you have 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son, and the son's name is Blake?
Yeah.
So is my son's name.
Oh,
Did you name him for the poet?
yeah, that was in my mind. I'm a great fan of William Blake, so that was definitely in my mind. And then I just thought, this will work well.
Yeah, us too. And I and my then husband also learned that it is the only word, or one of the very few words, 2 or 3 in the English language, that means 2 contrary things at the same exact time. It means impenetrably deep and profound darkness, absence of color, absence of light, and it also means an absolutely blindingly transcendent light.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was kind of cool.
I didn't know that. I'll go and tell him.
Yeah, go and tell him, Blake to Blake. And my son is a singer-songwriter, so there you go.
Cool.
So record is out now. What's the next project? Or are you going to recover at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I have actually just finished writing another book. So at the same time as I've been, just working on getting this record out, I've been putting the final touches to that. So I think that will be coming out next year. So, the rest of the next little while, I'm still doing promotional stuff on the record, and also working towards the next book coming out.
And do we have a title yet on the next book?
Yeah, it's called Another Planet.
Good title.
It's another kind of memoirish book, but it's about growing up in suburbia in the 1970s and all the fun and limitations that could impose. And then I talk a lot about the kind of things that, helped me escape from that kind of the confines of growing up in that kind of world. So again, there's stuff about music and feminism and things like that.
I love your prolificness. I do. I mean, people don't criticize plumbers for going to work and producing work every day. That's what they do. They plumb.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's what I do think. I think, if I've been given this voice and I'm lucky enough, to be given these opportunities, then, as I say, I feel now I should be saying yes to things and just keeping going. And as long as I've got ideas and things to write about, then, do it now while the energy and the opportunity is there.
You are an incarnate yes.
Well, try to be.
Well, I hope that every listener does not walk to your computer and download and buy and listen to record, which you've been quoted as saying that it was put together by 9 feminist bangers.
Yeah.
And it's profound and funny, incredibly moving, and memorable, and brace yourself for this 8.5-minute masterpiece called Sister. Everything else on the record is pretty damn great too. So thank you, Tracey, for the work that you have been doing and are still doing and will do.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And thanks for being with us today.
Cool. That was great. Thanks.
Time for one last break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will return directly with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back to some fighting words. Quote, "We are looking into a broader pattern or strategy to buy the silence of the women." Period. Close quote. That is the phrase law enforcement officials chose to define the court-approved raid on 3 New York premises of Michael Cohen, Trump's fixer and secret keeper, while the FBI swept those places for evidence of bank fraud, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and campaign finance violations. None of the above mentioned Russia. And in fact, when Special Counsel Mueller's probe uncovered signs of this evidence, his superior, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, properly assigned this investigation elsewhere, to the Southern District of New York. There, it was under the orders of the Trump-appointed district attorney that the FBI raided Cohen's stashes. Only glancing, tantalizing clues are so far available, but we do know that probable cause would have had to be very strong for a number of judges to okay the raid. It seems to relate to suspicious timing just before the election, when that grotesque Access Hollywood tape hit, and everyone thought it spelled the end of Trump's candidacy. But within 48 hours, a flood of emails hacked from the Clinton campaign were suddenly released, sweeping everything else out of the headlines. We now know that the hacking was done by Russian trolls, with WikiLeaks as the middleman, and the Trump campaign predicting, interestingly enough, pre-release knowledge about the hacked emails. Such dense, convoluted webs are what law enforcement officials are disentangling. To do so, they're pursuing what other efforts his campaign made to bury or distract from attention. Stories like the Access Hollywood tape, stories about hush money payoffs to women with whom he had sex, either consensually or forcibly, women who, if not silenced, would have destroyed his candidacy, especially since, oh wait, where did that money come from? You know, the hush money. And wasn't it in effect a campaign donation? As were the hacks a donation in kind. By Russians? Well, press and pundits were braced for charges of campaign collusion with Russia, obstruction of justice, acts of corruption, and a host of other exposed illegalities. Not many people saw this one coming. This focus on the broader pattern or strategy to buy the silence of women. I mean, women. Sexual behavior? Sexist behavior? Something as commonplace, omnipresent, politically inconsequential as that? Only a few feminists saw a broader strategy here to ensure the silence of women as the center of the labyrinth, saw the women as the key that, once turned, would bring Trump down. Feminists have been saying all along that a broad pattern or strategy to ensure the silence of women defines patriarchy itself. That strategy is no longer working. Let me introduce into evidence the Me Too movement, now worldwide, unstoppable, and affecting every corner of society. Exhibit A. Me Too has moved into the field of architecture, where even powerful celebrity architect Richard Meyer stands accused of long-time sexual misconduct. Exhibit B. Me Too has rolled into the publishing industry with a growing list of prominent authors mired in harassment and assault scandals, including best-selling children's book authors. The result? Cancelled book deals, pulped copies, bookstore boycotts, expulsion from writers' conferences. Sherman Alexie cleverly asked his publisher to delay the date of a forthcoming paperback edition of his memoir titled You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, following a recent NPR report in which 3 women accused him of sexual harassment, after which the American Indian Library Association withdrew their award to him. Exhibit C. We see that a record number of women filed as U.S. House of Representatives candidates this year, 309, topping the previous record of 298. And that's not counting the historic number of women running for governor and for state and municipal offices. That in itself shatters the erasure strategy, but something even more transformative is going on. Heather Cagill reported in Politico that female candidates are confronting taboos in new campaign ads. She pointed out from nationwide research that women running for office are turning campaign norms and long-held gender stereotypes inside out with a flurry of new ads that highlight once forbidden topics and images. These range from breastfeeding on camera to sharing intimate stories of sexual abuse. Now that's cause for double celebration, because while quantity surely does matter, quality is what always makes the deepest change. If women continued to run as imitation men, denying or hiding their feminism, conforming to the slick, sleek, compromised, boring standards of what a candidate should be, it's fair to ask, what have we really won? But women running on women's specific issues, which happen to be all issues, and positioning those issues accurately as affecting everyone, women running unafraid to place so-called womanly values front and center, women refusing to conceal the righteous rage of the abused and despised, women ready to question everything, to redefine power as power to, not power over. A record number of those women can change the world. The days are certainly not over yet for strategies to ensure the silence of women, however. Exhibit D. The new federal law against sex trafficking classified advertising. It's been a decades-long fight waged by the feminist movement to shut down Backpage, even when it was still just in print, and after it became Backpage.com. And last week, a 93-count indictment charged Backpage.com with facilitating prostitution and revealing details about victims, including minors as young as 14. The silencing? Press coverage included praise for Trump, who signed the bill into law with fanfare as a defender of women, and the coverage included the religious right, who backed the legislation, and also extensively noted opposition to the law mounted by representatives from the sexual exploitation industry, so-called sex workers' rights groups, who claim that this law negatively affects their employment. Rarely was there mention of the decades of women's rights activism still ongoing in the battle against prostitution. Silenced. A confused public has been offered only a binary choice between religious fanatics opposed to sex, not sexism, and pawns of the sexual exploitation industry claiming to represent the freedom to be bought and sold. In the long run, though, the boys' strategy just isn't strong enough to smother the screams and shouts, the songs and the voices of women, and now that's becoming true even in the short run. Trump and Cohen can't get away with trying to buy the silence of women. Neither can architects or authors, politicians or pimps. There is no way to ensure the silence of women anywhere, not anymore. We are moving from the center of the labyrinth, through the maze, to the outer edges, and to the world. We are the key, and we are turning. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast in our radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com. There you can find the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. You can also stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast at iTunes and Stitcher. Be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter, and you can check out my website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.